おはようございます。
おはようございます。
日本人ですか？
日本人じゃないよ。キウイです。
はいはい。はじめまして。
はい、はじめまして。よろしくお願いします。
すいません。お名前は何ですか？
名前はノーム・コリンズです。
はじめまして。はじめまして。
はじめまして。
日本が大好きです。
僕も。素晴らしいね。
はい。すいません。日本語ちょっと話せます。
僕もごめんね。いっぱい忘れられたね。
心配しないで。
はい、そうです。英語、今から。
That's about it for me, you know?
Yeah, me too.
It's amazing.
It's nice. Awesome.
Oh, mate, honestly, what a you know, this, I just, you know, actually, this is a lot, just while we're here, I had this epiphany one day, and I said to myself, people are like books. You know, when I feel like the universe is like a library. You know, we know that there's a creator. We know that someone's made this thing. We don't know how or when or what the story is, but we walk in there, and we come from a section, right?
Yeah.
And we're all one individual novel or book, and we have this information, and obviously it hasn't finished yet.
Indeed. And it's a never-ending story.
Right? And we're the author of that. And, you know, there's all these authors and books and stories, and they're all different sizes and colors, but at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of people walk past maybe these sections and they maybe have a look and they go, oh yeah, I'll have a look, but they actually don't get to read all the books, do they?
Oh, well,
and it would take more than a lifetime to read them, wouldn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And most people are busy writing their own.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Well, which is a beautiful thing.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, by looking at you, you're the normal Kiwi bloke. No. You've lived in Japan, you've been around, you know, a lot of Asia and Japanese wife, kids, and can you write kanji as well?
I used to know katakana and hiragana, but the kanji I didn't grasp. No. So, and I've probably forgotten all that now anyway. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's been over a decade since I was in Japan. So
wow, yeah. Times have changed, eh?
Oh yeah, for sure, indeed, indeed.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, obviously you've got a lot of words, and you've come down a pretty similar path in terms of me and discovering what the reality of some things are, you know, coming through language, and legalese is probably a massive one that people seem to forget to learn, I think, eh?
Well, it's a whole separate language, and the tricky thing about your legalese is it looks like English, it sounds like English, but it's not English. It might as well be chimpanzees, in fact, rather than Japanese or Portuguese. But yeah, in fact, it is. It's a whole completely different language, and it's a very, you know, without delving into it too much, it's a very deceitful language. It's actually designed to get us into a situation of misunderstandings, and a lot of assumption and presumption goes into that equation as well. So yeah, it gets to be quite tricky. So we try to stay in the simple English, Queen's English if we can, but you know, it's a language that we don't normally use on a day-to-day level, but as soon as we're dealing with agents of the Crown or anyone in an official capacity, then we've got to be careful about the language that's being used, because it's very tricky.
Yeah. And what got down in the path? Like what was like, oh, actually this is something that's, you know, I've never looked into this, or this is new, or
sure, yeah, because it's not your average road that people go down.
Yeah.
So how I got into it was my wife is Japanese. I met my wife here in Nelson 20 odd years ago, 23 or 4 years ago, and yeah, we lived together here for a couple of years, and then moved over to Japan, virtually just to go over there for a bit of a holiday and our honeymoon, so to speak. We went to a couple of countries first for our honeymoon, but I wanted to meet the in-laws, of course, and they wanted to meet me. And when we got over there, a lot of my wife's friends were asking me, oh, can you teach my kids some English? And it got to the stage where we just decided to stay there and open up our own English school, and I ended up at the peak of it having over 100 students from the age of 3 with their mothers. Of course, they were only half-hour lessons, but just getting used around being with gaijins, you know, foreigners. Because in actual fact, the town that we were in was on the east coast of Japan, and there weren't many foreigners around there.
Right.
And so just going to the local supermarket, like old ladies would be banging their trolleys into the aisle while looking at me, you know. Oh, there's a foreigner. Oh. That's how unusual they were.
Yeah.
So I become pretty famous and pretty popular pretty quick, and as I say, we ended up having over 100 students in our own private school, and then I got invited to a couple of elementary schools as well to teach. So, and then on top of that, to answer your question, I had about 40, I had, actually it ranged, I had about 40, 50 odd adult students as well. But one of my elderly adult students was a Japanese lady, and she was in her late 70s, or sorry, early 70s at the time. By the time I ended there, she was in her late 70s. But she would always quiz me on English and the origins of words. She'd travelled all around the world. She'd been to places like Machu Picchu and Stonehenge and Egypt and that. And so she really loved the alternative conversations, which was right up my alley at the time, especially being in Japan and not having a lot of people to talk to about those subjects. It was a, I really enjoyed the lessons myself. So, but she would always quiz me on origins of words, where does this saying come from, where does that word come from? And myself, I hadn't even passed school cert English in school, so I was on another learning curve. I was already trying to learn Japanese at the time and the culture and everything, but I had to go back and pretty much study English again to be able to answer this lady's question. I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was doing, well, although that was the case. Funnily enough.
Well, that's the thing, I feel like, as you know, speaking in a few languages, that there's always an origin to something. There's always the beginning of something that becomes something else. There's never one without the other, right? And I feel like with English, that's purposely by design, just like being taught in a way that it's just how it is.
Yeah.
Well, no, not really.
Well, that's,
and I mean, English is technically a 6-month-old baby compared to the half the languages that are out there today.
That's right.
Yeah.
The thing with English is, and you're right, we are taught. It's a taught. It's a civil taught. It's the base word of torture.
Yeah.
and that's what it is.
Right.
But our language is living. It's alive. It's evolving all the time, and especially with the text, when texting come in, the whole language changed again. So it's a living thing, and it's something that I try to keep up with all the time, because it is evolving.
Yes.
And it's a very powerful tool once we learn to harness it.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, harness it. Yeah. You have to really embrace it and harness it, because a lot of people, they don't realise what I think they're saying half the time, do they,
Well, it's not only that people don't comprehend the power of their words, because, our words manifest things.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know of Dr. Emoto and his messages in water and the experiments that he did.
I've heard about this.
Yeah.
Is this the one when he talks about, he gives one tender love and compassion, and the other one he throws so much hate and whatnot?
That's right, yeah. Like, basically, he got a bucket of water and he took 2 cups of water out of it, and he abused one, and he gave love and compassion and affection to the other.
Wow.
Froze the water, and then analysed the molecules under the water. Now, the structures of the water that were abused were very discordant. There was no pattern to them, and they were just a mess under the microscope. But the ones that he spoke positively to, giving thanks and gratitude and love and affection and compassion and all that stuff, the molecular structure of them were like we see snowflakes under a microscope, beautiful, symmetrical, all together and in harmony.
Amazing.
So when we consider that just our verbal, and he kind of rocked the scientific world with these experiments, and he was denigrated a lot, and what they try and do, they try and rubbish you and character assassinate you and all the rest of it, because of the profound implications of the experiments that he'd come up with. And so when we look at our bodies being, we've heard of up to 80% of water, well over 60, but up to 80% water, the words that we're using all the time have an effect on our physical being, and he proved that.
Well, that's right. And people forget how much percentage we actually carry of water.
Indeed.
And so going back to, as you said, how important it is. That bucket of water is actually inside us.
Indeed, it is. Yeah. And so he also did it with writing as well. He would just write the word love and put it on a glass of water, and write the word hate and put it on a glass of water, and the same effect happens. So not only is the vocal manifesting things, but also the written word. So it's extremely powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And this is what fascinated me so much about it, and why I've delved so much into that rabbit hole. As you can see from the books I have, I've got probably 30 odd different dictionaries, and I've got over a dozen different Bibles and concordances and all the law books I have, because it just fascinates me, and you can't have too many reference books.
Well, that's it.
In my view.
Yeah. Well, as they say in Arabic, "Luga wahida la takfi," which is like one language is never enough. So I don't know. I forgot the word book in Arabic, but you could say one book is never enough as well, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so, look, you obviously went down the common law path, and so that's something altogether. I think that's really becoming now a trend in this nation. People are starting to really click on and ask and try to comprehend what it's all about. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You know, the funny thing about people is that when they're in their comfort zones, they don't worry about things too much. But when the old wolves start circling the paddocks, the old sheep lift their heads up from the cud and think, "Oh, wait a minute, what's going on there?"
Yeah.
So, and this is kind of what's happening at the moment. Society's starting to wake up to a lot of the facades and you know, misinformation and disinformation that is actually out there. I mean, the real misinformation and disinformation coming from the one source of truth.
Yeah. You just can't beat it, can you?
No, they set themselves up beautifully.
Yeah. So give us beautifully, eh?
Yeah. You know, the thing I've learned about words and you know, there's so many profound things that are on the surface of things. Like, we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means to listen twice and speak once, especially when we're dealing with a language that is full of so much duplicity and misconceptions and misunderstandings, and that it's so easy for us to misconstrue what it is we're trying to communicate when we're dealing with a tool that's faulty, and it almost handicaps us to a certain degree because it boxes us in.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, but you know, the thing I learned about teaching English is that you know, it's universal. Once you start to have a command of the words and the language, then you can start to convey all sorts of information to all sorts of people and all sorts of different levels of comprehension and understanding. And through teaching English to peoples whose second language is English, your vocabulary changes immensely. So living in Japan, like after about 5 years or so, whatever, I'm not sure how long it was, but I came back to New Zealand, and I realised that my language, I'd lost a lot of the more complicated vocabulary that I normally used, and it had simplified my language, and I was talking basic English to people back here in New Zealand because I was so used to talking to people whose language is a second language. And it's a big miscomprehension, a misconception that we have when talking with people whose second language is English. You know, and I did it myself while I was in Japan. People would talk Japanese to me, and I wouldn't understand most of it, but I kind of got the gist of it, so you just agree anyway.
Yeah.
And it can put you into situations that aren't so good if you're
all that too. Yeah,
you know, it can get you into difficult situations. But
yeah.
You know, language is fascinating. I love it. I love it. It's a fascinating tool.
Yeah.
It's a very, very powerful tool. And when we look at, you know, see, the thing that I started looking into, I started realising that there's different forms of language. For instance, the language that's used in treaties and constitutions and proclamations and declarations, and then your legal vocabulary and dialect, and that it gets complicated very, very quickly. It's very tricky, and I think it's almost designed that way. It's almost designed, and there is design within the language.
Yeah,
you know, it's code, and it's the kind of thing that I discovered through teaching the language. And looking at the etymology and the origins of all these words and where it is, and how the different branches of language, you know, like you've got medical language, you've got religious language, you've got financial language, you've got money language, banking language, you know, and you've got your political arenas and all that sort of stuff. But there are words that kind of pull all those different segregated areas into one. You know, like you can talk about volume, for instance, the word volume. Now, volume can mean sound, or it can also mean water. So, you know, this is once you start to look into the duplicity of the language we're using, you start to understand how it is that a lot of people are left kind of scratching their heads thinking, well, how can the government do this? How can they take my car off me? How can they you know, steal my house? How can they take my children off me? People are left scratching their heads because they don't comprehend that the language is the tool that's being used to deceive them. It's a deceptive language. When we start looking into the, you know, the constructs of government and politic and all that sort of stuff, even religion, all that sort of stuff. You know.
Definitely,
it's fascinating stuff.
It is.
It really is.
And so, you know, let's start from the basis of things. Maybe there's people out there going, oh, there's, you know, there's natural law, and then there's LORE, and then common law. Obviously, Whakapapa, ones that are not part of the New Zealand corporation as such. But we're all, you know, what can you break down the differences, or what do you have one saying that's better than the other, or do you think there's one more abstract compared to the other, or, you know?
Okay, that's a good question, because there is a lot of confusion about that.
Yeah.
So they're hierarchical, okay? So like in the beginning, if I can grab my King James version of the...
I was going to say, that's a good start, isn't it? In the beginning.
Well, that's right, in the beginning. In the beginning was the Word.
Mm.
You know, that's extremely powerful. So in the beginning was God. Now... God is a word that can incite a lot of people. You know, it can incite with an S-I-G-H-T, or it can incite with a C-I-T-E. It can incite, or it can incite you. You know, so again, the duplicity of the language. Once we start looking at it, especially phonetically, because the phonetics... So you've got to understand that there's two different levels of English that we're using. But I won't go into that now because it gets quite complicated. But the Phoenicians gave us our phonetics.
Yes.
Okay, and it's a phony language. It's a phony language. That's why a phone is called a phone, because it's not real. Like, I can be talking to someone on the other side of the world, but 60% of our communication is visual.
Right.
You know, it's all the nuances, it's the intonation, it's the body language, it's the environment, the context, all these things come into play when we're communicating with each other. And so when you're on a phone, you're losing 60% of your communication. So straight away we're in a disadvantaged position. So being conscious of this, though, allows us to adapt our language accordingly. Okay. But okay, so there's hierarchy within laws, but God is a word that, and in my workshops I always define the definition of God as an acronym, being G-O-D is gift of divinity. Wow. It's the gift of divinity. We've all got it. Whether we recognise it, how we exercise it, whether we acknowledge it or not is entirely up to us. And whether we want to worship, you know, whatever our idols are, whether it be Jesus or Yeshua or Krishna or Buddha or Muhammad or whoever it is, we've all got it. Whether it's Tom Hanks or Mickey Mouse, you know, you can have whatever idols that you want, whatever graven image you want to idolise. So I always define God as the gift of divinity, and however you manifest that in your world, that's up to you. That's the beautiful thing about us being creators and having choice and free will. And so it doesn't matter what religion you go to. Now, as I said, I have lots of Bibles here, but I'm not a religious man, because if we look at the word religion, it's actually two words. Re, as a prefix in English, means to do again. Like if I take something off the shelf and I put it back on the shelf, I return it. Okay. So re means to do again. And allegion from the Greek means to bind. Now, I don't want to be bound once, let alone bound twice. And that's why we have the Bible. Bi meaning two. These are bulls, actually. And actually, even the word Bible should be B-I-B-U-L-L, because they're canon bulls. They're from the Vatican. So, it's, you know, and this changes jurisdiction. Once you change the letters, it changes jurisdiction. And it's one of the things I have a bit of a contention about at the moment with... the authorities trying to change the name of New Zealand from Aotearoa, from New Zealand to Aotearoa. It changes the jurisdiction, so we need to be very careful and very clear about, you know, what's going on there. So there's a hierarchy. So as I say, I'm not religious, but, you know, it doesn't matter what religion you go to, they will all have their precepts or edicts or things that govern the way that they socially interact in that. And so, you know, we have, from the King James Version, we have the Ten Commandments, okay? But we can pretty much concentrate them down into three, which is don't kill, don't steal, and don't deceive. And I even go one step further and just concentrate them down into the simple one of do not deceive. do not deceive, because if I'm deceiving myself, you know, I'm deceiving others, and if I'm deceiving others, then that's lying, that's cheating, that's not being upfront and honest. And so I just concentrate and do not deceive. So I'm not a religious man, but I'm a very spiritual man, and I believe that the Creator is endowed within all of us, and we are part of a great bigger thing that we are, you know, floundering around and trying to figure out, but we won't ever actually try and figure it out, because it's a never-ending story, and it's, you know, it's much bigger than all of us. Yeah. We're only a little piece of the great bigger body of things, so we can only comprehend what's in our locale.
Right. And for the amount of time that we have in this lifetime anyway, right?
Well, that's right. See, I believe we're immortals anyway, and this is just a simulation. And as soon as we're out of here again, we're back in again, because we're building on our personalities. Our personalities, you know, are timeless. Yeah. You know, a 2-year-old child has a personality straight away. You know, they've got their own character, their own way of doing things and seeing things, and that's the beautiful thing about it. Yeah. And as we evolve, you know, the more involved the soul is, I think the more developed the character is in the individual, and that's, for me, that's how it works anyway. Yeah.
So another thing I just wanted to mention as well, like obviously we've got even in the Holy Bible there, that's even in Dog Latin. And I think a lot of people forget about this part of it as well. Obviously, you know.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. That's a very interesting point that you bring up, because, you know, these are 2 books of the law. Yes. These 2 books carry the law, and in fact they complement each other extremely well. With your Dog Latin and your Dog Latin is your capitis diminutio maxima, is the Latin term for it, or otherwise we just know them as capital letters. And capitis means to cut off. Capital punishment is your head's being cut off.
Decapitate.
Decapitate. Exactly. So what this particular text and the way they write it actually is a total denigration of your rights. You've got no rights, because no one ever spells, because it's spelling, again, another word, they're telling us exactly what's going on. This spelling, no one ever writes their name in full capitals, and yet everything you get from officialdom or commercialised corporations, like your government, like the banking system, like your credit cards companies, they always send you your bills, because that's what they are. They be ill upon us. This is again play on the phonetics, but this is the magic of words. Once you see the duplicity of it, you start to comprehend the many levels of misunderstandings that are built into it. But anyway, they'll send you your name in full capital letters, and no one ever writes their name in full capitals. So it's not you. Again, it's another jurisdiction that that joinder is being created to, because we say, oh yeah, I'll just sign here. And all of a sudden we've created joinder to all sorts of terms and conditions that are attached to the Dog Latin and capitis diminutio maxima. So this is the Butterworth New Zealand Law Dictionary. It's 7th edition. But on here, very interestingly enough, you see LAW.
Land, air, water.
Which is the land, the air and the water. That's right, it's an acronym for those 3 things. But you'll notice it's all in lowercase. Yes. It's all in lowercase. And yet, with English, we're taught that to make something into a fact, to bring it into a noun, we use a capital letter at the start. So they're telling us straight away that this is not fact. They're calling it law, all in lowercase. It's not fact, okay? They're actually referring to this law here. This is what they're referring to. But again, it's that duplicity of the spelling of the text that gets us into different jurisdictions. So, as I was saying, both these books complement each other. Both these books teach us to walk on the water. Jesus Christ walked on the water. He tells us how to walk on the water. This book here deals with admiralty, jurisdictional, banking law. It's commerce, it's money. This book teaches us how to operate our vessels on the sea, walking on the water. Both of these books will bring us great revelation. This thing reveals lots of things, and this thing also reveals lots of things. There's all sorts of the word comes to mind is rubbish. There's lots of rubbish in these books, but there's also some extremely powerful maxims and parables that give us remedy, because maxims are extremely powerful things. Maxims are, in law, uncontestable truths. They're time-stamped, they've been proven throughout history, they're unmovable truths. So they're very powerful things. And there's a lot of them out there, of these maxims. But you know, we only need to know a few of them to be able to seek remedy. And one maxim is that there is always remedy within the law. We just have to find it. It's always there. They've got to give us remedy, and they do. This book gives us remedy, and this book here gives us remedy. Okay,
yin to the yang.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You know, this book here actually deals with the dead. This book here deals with the living. But in both of these books, you will need conviction. You will get conviction in this book because you've got to be convicted to your word. And same in this book, you're going to get convicted. Although this one's a legal conviction, it's gonna financially handicap you. This one here is actually going to set you free. Yeah. This one gives you freedom. So, so with that regard, I'm not a religious man, but I carry this book around here because this is the common law. This is the common law. And there's another maxim that kind of proves this beyond all reasonable doubt, and that is the maxim, and most people have heard it, is that ignorance of the law is no excuse. How can ignorance of the law be no excuse? I haven't been to university for 6 years. I don't have a $100,000 student loan debt to understand and comprehend. How can ignorance of this be the law? It's not talking about this. Okay, it's not talking about your legislation, your acts, your statutes, your rules and your regulations. It's not talking about that, it's talking about this. Because everyone knows not to kill. Everyone knows not to steal.
Yeah.
Everyone knows not to deceive and harm other people. You know, even from a very young age, we know that. You know, I observed when my children were growing up as 5 and 6 year olds, they knew when they were lying. You know, we know when we're being deceitful. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's kind of our nature is to test the boundaries, to trick and to try and, you know, wangle our or define our own boundaries. Actually, is what we're doing when we're pushing those boundaries. You know, when we're testing dad or testing mum, that's what we're actually doing. We're defining the domes of our kingdomship, our kingdom, our dominion, our domain. That's where kingdom or queendom. You know, because we be as kings and queens. As king, we're asking questions, and queens, of course, kings and queens is the quest ion. Is the question. Ions are energy. The quest is we're on a life quest. This is a quest. We're all discovering our boundaries here. And so to do that, the way we do that is to be as king and queen, asking questions. Anyway, so back to my point. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. So they're talking about this law here. And it doesn't matter whether you're religious or not. This holds the you know, the operating. This is the operating manual for life and social duty and social edict and social conduct. You know, this is how we create the safest and best and most beautiful environment that we can, is by operating under these laws. And when we fall from them, of course, then we get what we've got now, which is a lot of deceit and misunderstandings going on.
And so for one that's obviously different religions and all that, and they say, oh, you know, well, the Quran was before the Bible and all that, and then, you know, you have so many different editions and all that. I think they need to understand, or need to comprehend, that, you know, obviously it came from, the original was Hebrew, isn't it? Sure. And the first English editions, actually, as you mentioned, the King James, isn't it? Not the New King James or all these, because there's so many. How many versions are there? I don't know.
There's over 60 versions.
Oh my goodness!
And that's what it is. They're versions. So again, they're telling us, oh, this is just a version.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what version you go to. Those three concepts of don't steal, don't kill, and don't deceive are pretty much incorporated in all of them, because they come from a higher. You know, these attempts of us putting things into words are just man's. You know, inability to be able to comprehend something that's incomprehensible.
Sure.
That's pretty much what it is. And we've done the best we can, and we've pretty much got it down pat, I think. You know, I think we have. I think we've got all the right ingredients to make a beautiful cake. You know, put it that way. Yeah. So ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so they're talking about this law here. And it's common law. It's common law because the commonality of it is don't kill, don't steal, don't deceive. That's the commonality of it. Yeah. You know, we know these things inherently. That's, again, a beautiful word, in here. It's inherent, inherently. You know, it's inside of us. We know these things. We're born with that insight and that seed. And so, and the other thing about this is, you know, we look a couple of 100 years ago, and you'd have to ride your horse a couple of 100 miles to find a book. But the book would be this one, and inside that book would be all your ancestry. Your great grandfather's name would here, and your great grandmother and their children, and all your parents, all your ancestry was inside the covers of these books.
Wow.
Again, reinforcing that maxim of ignorance of the law is no excuse, because everybody had one in their family.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the common law, you know, like all things, just like our language, evolved. It's an evolutionary thing. And so let's go back to the hierarchy of things with you asked me about the common law, the natural law, divine law, all that sort of stuff. So at the very top of it, we've got God's law. Okay, now under God, you know, and God come along and He made the universe, and He made the stars and the heavens, and then He made the earth and the seas and the fish and the birds and the bees and all the animals that run on it. They all operated in natural law. That was natural law. That is the natural law. The way that the animals interact, the way the forests interact with the soils, and the rivers interact with the trees, and the mountains and the sea and the sun. That's a contract.
Because it's natural.
That's
natural.
Right. That's right.
Natural
it's the nature of all.
Yes.
It is the nature of all. And so this is all the divinity of it. And it all, you know, it all overflows into each other. None of it stands alone in and of itself. It can't. It's like having, you know, you can only build a house from 3 sticks, not 2. You know, but you can stand on 2 legs. You know, and these precepts, these concepts, these ideals give us good standing, and so we can become very untouchable within ourselves once we get into that realm and connect with that source and that wider. And we've all got that, you know. No one is denied that. As soon as you've got the mental capacities and spiritual ideals and comprehensions, and I use the word understandings because there are certain things we do want to understand. Okay, so it's not a bad word, like you pick up on yourself there before, and a lot of them do. But you know, when we're talking normally, individual to individual, we don't have to worry about the language we're using because we comprehend what we're trying to explain to each other, what we're trying to express. So
we know which realm we're in.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. That's right. We know what realm we're operating in, and so. So you know, in the beginning was the word, and this is it. And
funny because even in Chinese, Tao is known as God as well.
Tao, that's right. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Because it's the know or the path to seek.
I think it's an acronym, isn't it? To a decentralized autonomous organism.
There you go. Because it is DAO in Chinese.
Tao.
Tao.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, wow. I didn't know that either.
Right, yeah.
It's like I've discovered so many things, but I never got so much deep into it because I'm just so busy been doing so many other things, and you're just connecting all the dots. It's just my brain's like right now.
This is the rabbit hole that I've been delving down. I've got books on language and you know, codes and symbols and signs and all sorts of things. So
it's just like you said, it's never ending, is it?
Well, it's never ending. It's never ending, and you know.
How long have you actually been doing this? Just by the way, just curiosity.
Probably about 30 odd years actually, because
I've only been doing it for 8.
But your grasp of other languages though is pretty impressive. I'm very impressed.
Wait, so is yours though? This is why we're here. This is beautiful. This is I think by far you're definitely the most knowledgeable in terms of coming to this that I've seen. It's unbelievable. So hats off to you. Yeah.
Thank you. There's other people out there doing pretty good stuff as well.
Yeah.
You know, so I've met Bob the Second and
Bob the Second.
Yeah.
That's a cool name, Bob.
That's his Facebook name.
Oh, okay.
Truth&Kiwi.freedom.
Okay.
Truth&freedom.kiwi. Sorry.
Shout out to you, man.
Yeah. Good one, Bob. Keep up the good work, brother. But you know, I've been out there doing workshops since I've been pretty much back in New Zealand, which is just over a decade ago. I arrived back in 2011 actually with my wife and 2 children. And previous to that, you know, as I say, looking into the language and that, I discovered the old treaties and our Hei Whakaputanga, Te Kara, you know, the flag of independence here in New Zealand, which, you know, unfortunately people didn't really even know about. Excuse me. After a couple of years actually being back in New Zealand, I decided I had to go up to Waitangi because people don't know that from the 28th of October which this is what happened back in 1835 in the harbours of Waitangi at the time, was the French Navy and the American Navy gave the Hei Whakaputanga a 21-gun salute, and it was given ascension by King William IV back in 1835 on the 28th of October. Now, my understanding and research, indicates that the 28th of October was the day that the court was opened up in Waitangi. And so what would happen is all the chiefs would arrive up in Waitangi on the 28th of October, and they would spend till the 6th of February in an open court. They were in an open court, so they would bring their grievances to the table. They would bring their, maybe they'd discovered some more connections, or with their whakapapa, which is extremely important stuff. Whakapapa, whakapapa in our genealogy is like the etymology in words. Etymology is a whakapapa of words. When you can go back and discover the origins of those words and get to the core, get to the real core of the meanings, of the intentions of those who uttered those words first. But once you go back to your whakapapa and genealogy, and it's all I did, I look back through the documentation and the stuff, and it brought me to the Hei Whakaputanga and independence, the flag and that United Chiefs and all the rest of it. And so I thought, I better go up to Waitangi and have a look what's going on up there, because I wanted to hear some of the grievances and different things that are going on up there. And so I went up there. Before I went up there, though, I rang around a couple of the maraes around here to see, is there other groups going up there? Can we all get on the same waka and waka up together and, rock up there? But they didn't even kind of want to know about it. Most of them didn't even know about it.
Unbelievable.
And this is way back in 2011. I thought, wow, what's going on? Well, why don't they know about this? It's so important and extremely relevant to our history. And again, that whakapapa. We've got to know the whakapapa to get back to the core of things and to the origins. And once we're very clear about those origins and the whakapapa and that, then there is no room for discretion or misinterpretation of that. Then we're very clear, we have clarity. And that's what we're all seeking, is clarity, I think. Yeah. So, it was very disconcerting to me to find out that most people didn't know. But I went up there anyway, and I spent a bit of time up there. I ended up going up a couple of years in a row, actually, and I ended up being invited into Tikanga Law Society up there with the deliberations that were going on. It was very fascinating stuff. Yeah. Extremely fascinating.
So you're mentioning Dao, the word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, going back to that, so, damn, I forgot what I was going to say now. No, anyway. But, so is common law with,
Yeah, so sorry, we still haven't sort of defined the hierarchy of the laws. So,
yes,
so let me get back to that. So in the beginning, God created the universe and all the trees and animals and birds and beasts and all that, and so, that's the universal. That's the very first trust that was ever created. Yeah. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The mind, the body, and the soul. Those are trusts. And so when God created the earth and the heavens and the waters and the birds and the bees, the fishes and everything that walked on the land and below the land and all the rest of it, that was natural law. They operated in natural law, and that worked beautifully. Everything ran very, very smoothly. But then God created man. Created Adam, and Adam's all good. He's all good while he's parked up on Earth by himself. He's like Tom Hanks on the Castaway Island. He can do whatever he wants. But as soon as there's another conscious, individual, sentient being arrive there, then we have to start operating in common law. That's where common law comes into play. Okay, so the natural law is actually a higher law, but you've got divine law, natural law, God's law. There's many different names for it. And in the Māori, they have the tikanga, which is our interpretation of the common law, because it involves the interaction of conscious human beings, live beings, okay? In the everyday sense of the word, I'm just going to use common English. So as human beings, our interaction, we operate in common law. This is where common law comes into play. We recognise our own divinity, our own hierarchical structure and things, and we comprehend that we're here to manifest, and we can do that together. And as long as we can work together, because it's a contract. It's like your rights end where mine begin, and my rights end where yours begin. But that space in the middle, that's where we get to create. That's where we get to build and develop our common law.
Yeah.
And the common law is an unwritten law. It's an unwritten law, but it actually did get put into writing through our 1688 Bill of Rights, which is another whole rabbit hole again, but a very interesting one for those. I urge people to look into the 1688-89 Bill of Rights. A very clever deception that's happening now with the government is that when they quote the Bill of Rights, they're quoting the Bill of Rights Act 1990. Now that ties us in, it hooks us in to all sorts of United Nations treaties, declarations and pacts, and we don't want to be involved in those because it takes away our autonomy. So we need to be very, very careful what's going on. We're in a very precarious situation here in New Zealand at the moment. We're on the very edge, knife edge, and we can fall both ways. We're about to lose a lot if we don't pull our heads away from the cud and start looking at the walls that are surrounding us. So, but that's happening. It's happening, naturally anyway. The closer the walls get, the more sheep are looking up, and that's a beautiful thing. So, I forgot where I was going there. So the hierarchy, the natural law. So that's where common law comes in. Our common law is developed, and it's an unwritten law because it's different to each area. Like when I lived in Japan, I lived in a fishing village. The next fishing village, they had their common law. We had our common law. But the commonality of our common laws was, here's our boundary. You don't go fish past that, and we won't go fish past that. So that was a common law that was common to those people in that area, that particular tribe, that particular village, or that particular shire back in the old days. And so that was the common laws to the shire. And so when you're in Rome, you better do as the Romans do. This is where this comes into play.
The phrase comes
from. You've got it, but if you know the common law, then generally you know most of the laws within that realm, or that village, or that jurisdiction, because that's what they are. They're jurisdictions we're moving in and out of. And so, but the common law for the mountain folk might be a lot different. They'll have, that's your paddock and that's your boundary, and you grow this here and we'll grow that there, and we'll be able to all come together and make life better for everybody and happier, and which is what we all want. And so that's the tricky thing about the common law, is that it's applicable to the people that are operating in it, and it's according to the people at the time, in the place, in the context, in their environment. So that's the kind of hierarchy of your common law, and what's happened with the common law is there are foundational common laws, and then so what the system or administrators of towns would do is that they would put them into writing. They would say, righto, we don't want anyone pissing on the street, for example. Okay, so they would write that into a law. So that's common law. We don't piss on the street. And so what happened is these common laws started to build upon build and become written until we have what we have now, which is acts, statutes, rules, regulations and policies, where you need permits and licenses and registrations and remedies, and these things that bind us and handicap us, in fact.
Which is no longer law, is it?
Well, no, that's right. Yeah. It's no longer law.
That's why they're bills, legislations or acts, right?
That's right, and that's the big difference people don't quite comprehend, is what is law and what is legal. Legal is legislation. This is all legal. This is all law. These are the differences. But as I say, these books, they complement each other. They'll both give us remedy. They both give us conviction. They both give us standing. And they both give us revelation. So they're beautiful things. And instead of us battling and being against each other, and this is the big thing we need to kind of get past, is we're not against anything. All we're doing, we're keepers. We're the keepers of freedom. Yes. We're not freedom fighters. Yeah. We're keepers of freedom. Yeah. We're promoters of freedom. Yeah. We're not against anything. No. So this anti stuff, the anti and against and all that, we've got to kind of drop that language, because it creates that raru vibration. That resonant. Yeah.
Totally for it.
That we all feel, that resonant anxiety that we all feel. And, that's the power of the language and the power of the words. It's extremely fascinating stuff.
Indeed, yeah. And so, as I mentioned earlier, Dog Latin, so maybe breaking down, the straw man and that sort of thing to understand how that comprehends to, everyday life now. How we're a bank account holder, we don't own it. As you say, legislation for registration, licensing.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two different worlds we operate in. Okay. When we're born, what happens is, I go into this a lot in detail in some of my other videos, but pretty much what's happening when we're born is a paper entity is created that looks like us, sounds like us, and seems to have the same name as us, but it's identified by the capitis diminutio maxima, the dog Latin.
Cool.
Sometimes called pig Latin, but we know it as capital letters. And it's an interesting thing about the word letter as well. Let in Old English meant to challenge.
Right.
So if I was going to let you cross my land, I'd be challenging you. So I'd want a couple of pigs and a chicken or something like that for you to cross my land. Or maybe my son likes your daughter. Maybe we can have an arrangement there and I'll let you cross my land. So let meant to hinder. And so we're given these letters in the spelling that's hindering us. That's what these things are there designed to do. And when we look at verbs, we describe verbs as the verb is the human. So the verb to drive is all good, but as soon as we put the human, we're defining the individual behind that action. It becomes the the driver. When we run as a verb, I become the runner. So we're always an because that's part of the era. That's part of the era that we're in, the ERA. We're era. We're in the 21st era, aren't we? So again, it's a play on words that gets us into a vibrational, resonant, lower frequency. And that's what once you start to recognise it, you can start to see the language that's doing it to us, bringing us, because it affects us, like Dr. Emoto clearly proved. These things affect us vibrationally. But once you recognise it, you can dispel it.
Right.
That's why we dispel stuff. We can dispel it. We can see what it is, and we can undo it. We can undo those spells through dispelling. So letters, they're there to hinder, they're there to err us, they're there to keep us into a lower vibrational frequency. Sure. And this is why, it's why it's evidenced by the fact that every time we want to present a document to the authorities, we have to submit. They always get us to submit our documents. So we're admitting we're sub, meaning below. We admit we're below you. Oh, I'm sorry, please, please. We're pleading. We're begging. We're begging for a right we already have, unfortunately. But this is the trickery of the system of the living entity and the straw man. They get us continually to, through trickery, they create joinder with a dead entity, which is the straw man, which is your paper entity that's created at birth through the registration process. So if we go look up the legal definition of the word registration, it pretty much means a transfer of ownership. So there's your vessel, there's your ship, there's the vessel and the vassal. You've got a vessel and then you've got the vassal that's created. Oh, the vassal and the vessel, sorry, is the ship. And so they create a paper entity. You've got your real living bodily entity, evidenced through the Bible, and you've got your paper straw man entity, evidenced through your full capitals, through your paper entity that's created that looks like you and sounds like you. So the word registration, so what actually happens is your mum, usually the mother, because she's always there, at birth. She's always there, but sometimes the father, sometimes the mother. If the mother's incapacitated, then they'll get the father to do it. But he or she becomes the informant. Now, in street language, informant means to narc. If I inform on you, then I'm narking on you. So what they're doing is they are dobbing you in. That's where you get the dob. The D-O-B is the date of birth. The date of birth is where they dob you in.
Dob you in.
They dob you in. You're being dobbed in. You're being an entity's being created, being registered, so you're being registered into this particular system. And from that point on, everything comes back to your paper straw man entity that you need to be able to operate in the commercial world later on.
Yeah.
When I first came back to New Zealand over a decade ago, I was doing workshops and that. People were asking me about the registration process of their children. Should I register my child at birth? Was a big question that always come up. And in the first instance, I would tell people no. Don't do it, because you're actually transferring the ownership of that entity over to the state. But in hindsight and in further research, I would suggest people do register their children, because unfortunately, due to the realm that we're operating in fraud anyway, because we use money, and money is fraud. Money's debt, it's fraud. Okay, it's a noose.
Yeah.
Money is a noose around our necks. And we have to, unfortunately, because we haven't evolved to a certain level of comprehension and understanding where we don't need money anymore, we just pay it forward and know that the universe will provide. Once we get to that stage, we're truly free. Then we're free.
Yeah.
But while we're using fiat currency money system, we're operating in fraud. And unfortunately, 99% of us have to use, unless you're living in the bush in a shack and with a couple of tools and eating insects or whatever, you can't really operate wholly in common law.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
Yeah.
We've got used to our comforts. I like me computer, I like me power, and I like me car, I like these things. These things help me to be able to make my life better. So we're not going to give up these things, and as it is, we need money to be able to affix those things to our realm.
Sure.
So we're operating in fraud anyway, and so with the registration process, I now encourage people to go through with the registration process, because you can actually get benefits from it. These registrations, they incur benefits, okay, and we want the benefits, okay, because in a trust situation, which is, all this is the administration of trusts in one form or another, and so we want to remain the beneficiary of our trusts, okay. And so even when you go into court, what's actually happening is when you walk in there as a beneficiary. The Crown Prosecutor, he's the trustee, and the judge is the administrator, the executor, or the settlor. And so what happens is that the trustee, when the judge calls your name, he's calling out the full capital letter name. It's not you. But as soon as you say, oh yeah, I'm here to deal with that, bang, you've created joinder to all the terms and conditions that are hooked into that full capital name, to that straw man entity.
You've accepted the fraud.
That's right. You've accepted the licenses, the registrations.
Just like when you hand over your license to a policeman, right?
That's right. You're accepting that. You're creating joinder.
Yeah.
You're creating joinder, and you're changing your jurisdiction from the beneficiary to the trustee. Now the trustee, he holds equitable title. He's the one that always pays. The trustee pays, okay?
Because he trusts.
That's right, because he holds the equitable title. The easy way to explain that is like, say, so I've got an estate, and I'll hand my estate over to a lawyer in escrow as trustee for the beneficiary of my children. So my children become the beneficiary. The trustee holds the equitable title. I'm the administrator, the fiduciary, with the fiduciary duty that's given the real property to the trustee. So I'm the settler, ultimately. I'm the administrator, the executor, or executor. Depends where you put the accent on that word. So the trustee holds the equitable title, and the beneficiary benefits from the trust. Okay, my kids will benefit from the trust that I've set up for them. That's how that works. But what happens when you walk into a court is that the judge calls out the full capital name, and all of a sudden you're being changed from the jurisdiction of beneficiary to trustee, which means you're liable and you end up paying. That's what happens every time. And so once you understand how to administer your trust, and because the beneficiary can also be the administrator as well. So I could set up that trust for my children, but I could also get a benefit from that trust as well, being the administrator. So I can be an administrator and a beneficiary. The trustee cannot be two positions. Okay, so that's again the rules of trusts, and that can get quite complicated quickly as well. But so that's what the actual court's doing. The court is trying to, change jurisdiction to make you the trustee, so you're liable, and we are liable.
That's why we're on the stand, right?
In the dock.
Yeah,
on the
yes,
dock.
on the dock.
That's
Because
your
it's maritime law,
maritime
right?
law. You're berthed, you're parked at the dock. They want you to cross the bar. The bar is the British Accreditors Registry. That's what all the lawyers are working for. The Temple Bar. You know, again, the sandbar. They shipwreck you. They bring your vessel up and they shipwreck you. You're open for salvage. And that's why we object. We throw objects in front of their ship. That's why the objects stop them from moving forward.
Yes.
That's why we have objections. Unfortunately, when we get to court, they call it a hearing, yeah? But most of the time, people have fallen for the dupe of getting a lawyer to represent them. No one can represent them.
No.
You can only ever present yourself in the present,
Yeah.
and that's a present.
Yeah.
You know, that's why it is. That's why that word is a trust in itself. The present. It's a beautiful thing. And so we want to remain in the present as a present, because that's a gift, and that's where the word actually gift comes from. Up there, I have gift up there. It's gamut. It's an acronym for gamut intra-fallopian tube. It's gift. Gamut intra-fallopian tube. Gamut means to move forward, intra, in between the fallopian tube. That's why a present is a gift.
Yes. That's why I actually I heard this saying many years ago is yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why we call it the present.
That's right. It's a present. That's right. Because when you're born, it puts you in the present.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the gift of life.
Amazing.
It is. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, you know, the more I delve down this rabbit hole, the more concentrated it becomes. It's like, you know, you look at things that looks like chaos, but once you start to break down the chaos and look below it, you start to see that there's a core to it. You know, there's a foundation for it all, and that's beautiful. You start to see the connection. Oh, this connection, boom, that connection. Next thing you're like a fireworks. You know, you're sparkling everywhere. It's beautiful, man. I just love it.
Yeah, and because you said you have your own channel, right? So you have quite a few videos explaining more of the stuff on there.
Yes, I've got a YouTube channel there. I've got over 60 videos on there.
Cool, 60. Oh, okay, I just flicked through it first. I didn't see you had 60. That's good. That's really good. Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
And I, it's all well and good. You know, they say knowledge is power. Yeah, and it is. Knowledge is power, but it's only power when it's actioned.
Knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. That's what I say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
You know, that's kind of a little bit different again. It's like me giving you all the remedy to get out of your rates and your mortgage and all that sort of stuff, and then you go to court and don't understand the language, and then boom, you're back in the shit again.
Right, because knowledge is power, but knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. So if we don't,
that's right.
You acquire it. We're not actually comprehending it.
Indeed.
And using it, are we? To the
that's right. That's right. You know, knowledge. You know, there's no good having a brilliant mind and amazing knowledge if you're not sharing it. You know, what's the point of, you know, I take this stuff to the grave with me. Well, wow, that just robs everybody of everything. Right. And, you know, through the grace of God, you know, excuse me, I've been given the opportunity and the time to be able to research and to be able to sit down and to be able to delve and to look at this stuff. And, you know, there's lots of synchronistic and coincidental things that push you into certain directions that are divine, and so they're not yours, they're not mine. Yeah, and so there's an obligation that you've got a responsibility and an obligation, which is even higher, to get these things out there and to help others. You know, because it's really. You know, it's really hard to see a lot of. You know, I used to go down Nelson Court, just go down there and sit in the gallery and watch the public gallery and that, and just to observe what's going on. Because of the language, I wanted to hear, you know, what are the interactions, who's the hierarchy in this particular system.
Well, it's the best country to go to for legalese, isn't it?
That's right, indeed. Indeed. So I used to sit down there and observe a lot of the different interactions that were going on. But some of the things, you know, if people just had a little bit of knowledge that was standing in that dock, they could have been set free. But unfortunately, it's because of our lack of knowledge that we fall into ignorance, unfortunately. And so, you know, and if I can help a few people out and you know, give a few people a path to follow, you know, I'm not gonna. You can lead people to water, but you can't make them drink. You know, and it's a thing. And really, you know, ultimately, all the information's there. It's all out there. It's just a matter of being able to, and I have had the ability to be able and time to be able to go into it and delve into it. So yeah. Yeah, extremely powerful information, and yeah, so I've got Not the Norms, my video channel. I used to have a radio station here in Nelson for a couple of years, just pretty much going over and covering. I used to interview counsellors and lawyers and people of the area that were doing really good things and that, but I lost my sponsorship and so that kind of folded, but the radio show was called Not the Norm, and so I just transferred it over into a YouTube channel. So I've got, so I'm on Not the Norm on YouTube. I'm Not the Norm on MeWe. Freeman NZ, one word, on Rumble, and what else am I now? I'm on Odyssey, is Not the Norm as well. I just started Odyssey as well. So yeah.
Well, I'll attach it all to this video, but I'll
awesome.
Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah. We're gonna get people educated, you know.
Yeah, man. Set them free. Set the people free.
Not learn, but rather acquire, right? Yeah, set the people free.
Yeah, damn straight.
And you said you run workshops as well. Do you do them here in Nelson? Or?
Yeah, I was doing them fairly regularly down here at where we had the meeting last night. With Farmer James. But yeah, no, I haven't actually got anything on the cards for a wee while now because I'm kind of waiting for my wife to come back so she can be here for my kids when I travel away. But end of next month I'll be back out on the road again. So if anyone wants to have a workshop,
you should definitely have like a national tourism thing, and I'll definitely promote it. That'll be amazing.
Oh really? Wow! Yeah,
100%, cool, man. People, you know, you need to get it out there, right? Because people are thriving for this. This video's been asked for a long time, and I just, you know, I know common law. Well, let's do. Oh, look at the time. You know, like nobody wanted to get onto it because obviously they weren't, you know, so acquired to the level of it. I'm guessing, and so this is the calling, as you say, the manifestation and the synchronicity, as you say.
Together,
So,
for sure.
Yeah,
it's a 4-hour workshop, usually over a 5-hour time period. Because people need a bit of a break to. Because believe me, my workshops are just full of, right from the beginning to end, information. It's all I offer.
It's all there in the book, so.
That's right. But I've had, I've been able to pull it all together, and as I say, I've been doing these workshops for over a decade now, and they're evolving all the time. You know, I'm always studying, I'm always learning, I'm always, trying to find new avenues and new ways of expressing and putting this information out there. So it's an evolving thing, but I've pretty much concentrated all the vital stuff that people need to know to be able to clearly see the distinctions of the jurisdictions that we're operating in and how to step in and out of them. It's extremely important. Otherwise, we're it's called legalese because it's the leagues of the sea. It's the leagues of the sea because it's unfathomable and we're drowning in it. And that's the problem. And
just like our head in the passport and
port passes. Port pass.
Port pass. Sorry.
That's the other thing too. You know, a lot of these older languages were right to left.
Right to left.
And so often we turn words around or break different words down into different parts. We can garner a deeper comprehension and understanding of what's going on. And that's again to do with the Whakapapa of words. So. Yeah, that's beautiful, man. It really is. It's powerful stuff. Once you learn how to despell, to descript, to describe, and to decipher. D means to undo as a prefix in our words. So to undo the spell, to undo the script, to undo the ciphers. And if with our vessels out on the sea, if we've got no wind in our vocal pipes, then we're in a lull. And that's where you get the Lu cipher. You'll get the Lucifer. You'll get the Lucifer if you've got no wind, because only the dead are silent.
Silence is consent.
That's right, silence is consent, and only the dead are silent. So that's why we invoice these people. We invoice them. See, that gives us charge. We charge and we invoice them. We don't let them bill us, we bill them. We invoice them. That's why we have a hearing when we go to court.
Because we don't plea.
No, that's right. That's right. We don't.
Yeah. Awesome. Norm, that's amazing.
No, it's been really good. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, take care, right?
Yeah, you too.
Domo arigatou gozaimasu.
Hey, do tashimaste.
Sayonara.
Sayonara. See you later.